your assets, let them know you're proud.
Oh, shalom, my friends. We are getting it and flaunting it, ladies and gentlemen, with an actress, a beautiful and delightful actress, ladies and gentlemen, a Tony Award winner who is with us in the neighborhood today. By the way, I am Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. I am a theater lover. I have seen this woman in the Will Rogers Follies on Broadway, where she played Keith Carradine and Dee Hoadie. Also on Broadway, of course, in The Producers with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. She was also our Critics Circle nominated for a play called The Nance. You've seen her in Curb Your Enthusiasm on that season where Larry David wants to be in The Producers. You have seen her on One Life to Live on TV. You've seen her in the movies Hero and The Company of Men. And by the way, and let us not forget this as well, off-Broadway, CADY HUFFMAN was in a show called Revolution in the Elbow of Ragnar Agnarsson, Furniture Painter. I mean, how can we forget that? So, ladies and gentlemen, about to also play Peggy Lee in New York in Cabaret, the delightful, the adorable, the talented CADY HUFFMAN. Shalom, CADY.
Hello.
Oh, shalom to you.
How are you?
Oh, thank God, I'm good. I'm sorry that your volume is quite low here. I wonder if we can do anything about that. Probably not, but we're going to try. Well, we're trying.
I hear you just fine.
Oh, well, that's because I'm yelling. They can hear me in New Jersey, quite honestly.
I'm pretty loud. I'm surprised you can't hear very well.
Well, yes, you are a belter. You are in that old showbiz merman-esque tradition of belting.
One of those things I can do, absolutely.
Now, so many questions to ask CADY HUFFMAN, but first, let's start with your recent project, the thing that you're doing first and foremost, which is a Peggy Lee cabaret bio show. When did that idea come to you?
Well, it's actually what we're doing is developing a one-woman musical more than a cabaret. So it is a musical about Peggy Lee. We got the idea. My friend Will Nunziata came to me about a year and a half ago, and he said, "Do you know Peggy Lee?" And I said, "Well, I have a poster of her hanging in my living room." He said, "Well, I want to develop a show about her." So we started about a year and a half ago trying to figure out how we wanted to bring Peggy Lee's voice and message into modern times. And, we worked really hard, lots of research. And we talked to her granddaughter, Holly, who takes care of her estate, and many people who had met her, many of her friends, and found our way in through her own lyrics and her own words. So we sing all the only songs that she wrote, either the lyrics or both the music and the lyrics.
So is Fever in there, or did she not write that one? I don't know off the top of my head.
She did. Fever is in there, yeah.
Oh, good. Because I get fever, basically all the fever and chills. That's just my personal misery. But what a wonderful song that is. What did you learn? Since you spoke to Peggy Lee's granddaughter, what did you learn from her that you didn't learn from reading books about Peggy Lee or just news articles of the time?
Well, what I loved about what her granddaughter said, because her granddaughter was able to spend a lot of time with her, was Peggy's personal connection to her fans and to the people she loved. She was a very intimate person. She liked making intimate connections. She said when she would meet with a fan, she would hold their hands and quietly talk to them. And I think there's so much, as people's stories get told and overtold, and the folklore around them becomes more true than their truth. It was nice to hear about her more intimate side and not more the gossipy side. So we were really trying to bring forth. She was a very spiritual person. She was lighting candles and saying prayers. And
I do that every Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as you do. But, she was a very spiritual person before that was in vogue. Now everybody kind of has some sort of spiritual practice and light candles and touches crystals and all that kind of thing. But she was doing it well before it was in vogue.
Now you mentioned, I'm sorry, but you mentioned you were doing specifically songs that she herself wrote or co-wrote. So what are other songs, because everybody knows FIBA, what are some of the others that you're going to be doing in the show?
We start out with I Love Being Here With You. What else do we sing? Fever. Oh, now you're making my brain work. And I was working last night. I am thoroughly awake this morning.
Oh dear. Do you do Jerusalem of Gold or what? Sorry.
She wrote all the songs. Most of the songs for Lady with the Tramp.
Really? Oh yeah.
Yes, she did, and she recorded them too. So that's her voice you hear.
In the Disney.
There's a lot. I can't even remember which ones are popular, which ones weren't, because they've all become so much a part of me at this point.
Wow. So how long ago did you start on this again?
About a year and a half.
Oh, so that's still fairly recent in terms of...
We're at the very beginning of developing this musical.
Mid-Mazel. By the way, I want to let people know that if they want to see the developmental part of this musical to be, which is called Miss Peggy Lee in Her Own Words and Music, it's going to be done July 24th and also July 31st at the Green Room 42. And for tickets to that, go to the greenroom42.com. But let's roll it back with Miss CADY Huffman here in the neighborhood. Gotta ask the typical question, when did you realize that you were born to perform?
Oh my God.
What?
Well, apparently, from my own folklore, my mother says I just pretty much came out dancing. And
see, I came out complaining. Yeah.
Well, that's why. Well, I won't go on. I don't know. I was surprised to learn that other people didn't know what they wanted to do as children. I just always wanted to take ballet, wanted to take my opera classes, wanted to read Shakespeare, wanted to do all those things. And I was really, 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 really taken with ballet as a child. But then I found that my ballet teachers were actually calling me Ethel because I sort of was loud in class. So I figured maybe I should go into musical comedy. Oh,
now, were you tall initially? Did you have how tall are you, by the way? You seem a million feet tall, but how tall are you?
I am not. I'm 5'8.5".
To me, that's a million feet tall, but okay, 5'8", 8.5".
6 feet, yes.
So, well under 6. And yet, were you tall as a child, like taller than your cohorts, which helped in ballet,
always.
or yeah? Sorry.
Always.
Oh,
always
okay.
Tall, always long, taller than the boys. Yeah.
So, when you switched from ballet or pursuing that kind of dance into musical theater, how old were you at that point?
Oh, I always did all of it.
Ah.
But then I started working when I was 18.
What was your first audition for anything? Other than ballet, I guess, or first musical.
My first audition. Well, it was probably a local production of The Pied Piper of Hamlet.
Oh my! Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I had one line. It was, "Here they come," and I got my picture in the newspaper in my horizontal striped top, my vertical striped pants. And as soon as I saw my picture in the newspaper, I was like, well, I guess I know what I'm going to do.
Well, that is a thing. That's a very, it's exciting. Even when you're 18, even if you're 68, it's exciting to have that. What was the first major gig that you booked?
Well, when I was 18, I went down to Los Angeles and auditioned to be they're playing our song at La Mirada Civic Light Opera, and I got it. That was my first professional audition.
Wow.
And then, still at 18, I auditioned for the Los Angeles company of La Cage aux Folles, and I got that. So I did that.
So were you among the kick line of some of them were men, some of them were women? And
yes, I was a teenage drag queen, Rabbi.
I was not.
I absolutely was.
Wow.
And then that was how I got to Broadway as well, was they called me after that. After we closed Los Angeles, they called me to replace one of the original members on Broadway when I was, 20.
So you were living in New York at this point. You were trying to be, like, coastal when you're doing it, La Mirada, but were you?
No, I was living in Los Angeles.
Oh, you were in LA.
California.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in California, so I was in Los Angeles when they called to go to Broadway. And I had to think for about 30 seconds. Do I want all my dreams to come true? And I thought, yes, I do. So I packed up all my bags and I flew to New York and went to Broadway.
But it's an interesting thing. If you were going to be a theater/musical theater dance person, why be on the West Coast in the first place, as opposed to living in or near Hell's Kitchen?
Well, I mean, it didn't take me long to get to New York, but I was from California, so it didn't make much sense for me to leave everything behind. And I was working in Los Angeles. There was a lot of video work at that time. And, I was doing musicals. They do musicals in Los Angeles. But of course, eventually I had wanted to go to New York. But, when you're 18 years old and you didn't grow up with any money, like you need someone to tell you can go to New York. I did anyway. I needed someone to say, hey, come on over to New York. Because I was happy. I was working. I was, doing lots of stuff.
So before we let go of La Cage aux Folles, do you have any Jerry Herman stories?
Jerry Herman stories. Well, I mean, he and Harvey Fierstein were at our opening night in Los Angeles, and that was exciting. I was not as close to them as the original cast.
Sure.
Was. But I just remember being a great guy. And then I got the chance to play Dolly Levi much later in my life.
Oh.
And there were all these great Jerry Herman songs that I didn't even know that I knew that were in Hello, Dolly. But, I have only anecdotes from others, mostly from Jerry. He is,
Sure.
One of the great popular composers for musical theater.
Now, here's something I want to add, because you, as you said, you played or have played Dolly in Hello, Dolly. So having done that, did you, and I always wonder about actors who've done a part and then have to see other people do the part. Did you see the Bette Midler Hello, Dolly that was on Broadway last season?
I did, yeah.
So when you're watching that, can you just enjoy it, or you see her up there and say, oh, I was funnier, or I did that differently?
No, I mean, please, could I be any more different than Bette Midler? I will let other people be the critics. I am not critical of my fellow performers. I think,
or of yourself.
We'd all deserve a chance, and she's obviously an icon and brilliant. I can learn from her.
I'm not asking you to diss her, but I'm saying when you're watching someone else do a part that you've played, can you let it go and just enjoy the show? Or are you always thinking, oh, I remember when I sang that and I did it this way?
I don't know. It just depends on who I'm watching, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, certainly I get a lot of, little girls sending me videos of them singing Flaunted, and I definitely played it different than a 10-year-old or an 18-year-old when I did it. So I find it quite charming and awesome to watch other people sing.
Oh, so it brings us.
Created.
All right. Now I want to go in two different directions because I have a producer's question, but even still before that, let's move on. Especially since so many people who watch this program and who care about musical theater have been watching the miniseries Fosse Verdon. You worked with Bob Fosse on what I guess was his last show, Big Deal, on Broadway.
Yes, I did.
Give us some Bob Fosse memories.
It's funny you should ask. Last night I was hosting a benefit out here in East Hampton, and we were paying tribute to Bob and Gwen Verdon. And one of his grandchildren were there to accept the honor. Bob Fosse just utterly changed my life. I was 20 years old when I got that part, and I was a terrific dancer. I could do anything, kick my face, spin like a top, jump. But what he required of every performer was he demanded a lot from us. He made me a better actor. I was required to tell a story through his movement and to be very specific in the movement and very individual. So it was this opening of my artistic life to know that, taking more responsibility for my own, for my, the way I tell stories. I mean, I could go on and on. I have stories about the audition. I have stories about the process of rehearsal. I have stories about...
Well, tell one or two. That we're interviewing here, saying, I have stories about this, but I'm not going to tell you them. What? Tell me.
They're just long stories. But at the audition, if you've seen, I mean, I'm assuming you've seen the movie All That Jazz.
Yes. The Bob Fosse, right, yeah.
Yeah. So the audition was exactly like the opening of All That Jazz, where there's, 1,000 dancers on a Broadway stage, and they even are teaching the same routines that we did for that audition.
Wow.
And Bob Fosse, they would demonstrate a routine, and you'd break down into smaller groups, and he would walk up to every single actor out of 1,000 of us. Every single dancer, he would walk up and either say, thank you, please stay, or I'm sorry, it's not going to work out this time, and release them. He had the respect, the love for dancers, that he would not play those silly games that a lot of people play at auditions, where they sort of, they can just be downright rude and, ignore an audition, be on the phone during an audition, looking down during an audition. He wasn't. He walked up to every single performer and thanked them and either asked them to stay or to go. And the audition lasted about 3 days.
Oh, my God.
So I kept on. I was in La Cage at the time, so I wasn't thinking I was going to get this show. Somebody even said, you don't even bother going. That's going to be an all-black show. And I was like, well, I really don't care if it's an all-purple show. I really want to dance for Bob Fosse. So I wasn't expecting to get it, which might have been why I did well. I was just excited, not too worried about it. But I kept on making all of the cuts. And at one point, you have to come out by yourself, introduce yourself, and sing a song. And I spell my name a little bit funny. I spell it CADY, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Right.
And so I said, hi, I'm CADY HUFFMAN, Cady like lady. And I sang my song. And then we did more dancing. He was giving us some very specific, very Fosse, sexy movement to do. And I'm doing it. He walks right up to me and says, okay, Cady like lady, this is no time to be a lady. I was like, okay, in my little pink leotard and ballet shoes. I guess I got to do something a little different. But yeah, so that was exciting. That was thrilling.
Yeah.
And to see it, because I had been on a date when I saw All That Jazz. I was 14 years old on a date with Andy Fuller, and we're watching All That Jazz, and the dance, Take Off With Us comes on, and Sandal Bergman rips off her top and starts dancing around. My eyes are huge. Andy Fuller leans over to me and goes, would you do that? And I said, yeah.
Yes. Yes, but you didn't actually. But if only you did.
I didn't have to do that, but I was like, yeah, whatever.
Whatever it takes.
If the man wants, I will do it.
But one of the negative things that you hear about Fosse dancers is because his movement was so specific that if you dance for him long enough, you get all sorts of physical problems with your ankles and your legs and your stuff that you have to be really, really careful, as opposed to a lot of other choreographers, where if you just do your usual limber and loose and exercise and yoga, you're fine. Did you find that working on his show was more of an ordeal on your body?
No. I'd be curious to talk to those dancers who say that. I have never heard that.
Ah, okay.
I mean, his stuff is turned in and specific, but I know other choreographers who are much harder on their bodies.
Ooh, like who?
It's just,
who have you
I'm
worked
not going
with?
to name names, but, there's a lot of not very good choreographers out there who require, you to kick your face, jump, splits, do all these ridiculous tricks for not much result. Whereas Bob, you did not have to do a lot to have a large impact. His movements were not overly, crazy and meant to hurt you, but they were very specific. So yeah, I guess, you could get put into a position that was hard on your body, but I don't see it as any
Yeah. I mean, I have a problem with
you only live once. And if this is what my body needs to do to live, then I'm all in.
Well, I feel that way about Jewish wedding choreographers. They're like, go left, go right, go left, go right. And eventually it just becomes a pile in the middle with a chair falling down with the bride in it. It's a terrible thing.
The papas. We know what a Jewish wedding looks like. We've seen it on Broadway.
Hey, what is the closest? I know you're not Jewish, but what is the closest that you've been to like Jewish life? Just curious.
Well, the first boy I lived with was Jewish, so I consider myself Jew-ish.
Okay, be careful with that. What do you mean by that?
Because I'm in theater in New York.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it is such a very strong culture. We all speak a little bit of Yiddish. We all it's like I don't even know how much of the Jewish culture lives in me. I just use words, and somebody says that's a Yiddish word. Like, oh, I guess so. My mother taught me tush.
Oh yeah.
She grew up in New York. Mazel, there's a Meshuggah. These are all the words that just existed in my vocabulary before I knew even what Jewish was.
Oh, man, you lived. I'm assuming that first Jewish person you lived with was either a doctor or a lawyer, or a rabbi. No, an
actor.
Oh, an actor. Can you? What is it like? Should actors date, or should one that never works out?
I don't know. I mean, there's Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward figured it out. Sometimes it works great. I mean, if you can really, because you know what each other is going through. Sometimes normal people cannot relate to the artist's life. But it's just up to the individuals. I think it's hard no matter what. I think that 50% of them work and 50% of them don't, and it's pretty much across the board no matter who you choose your first or second time.
Fair enough. So, by the way, who are you with? Anybody? We get a little personal here in the neighborhood. Who are you?
Really?
What? Sorry. Yeah.
We get a little personal. Well, I have no comment.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Just wondering here.
Are you a married person, Rabbi?
Oh my God! I am married to my dear wife Miriam Libby for many, many years. We have 19 and a half beautiful children. Well. Well, 15 are beautiful. The other 4 and a half, the inbreeding is a problem. But no, we love them, and we kind of love each other. We tolerate each other. And
And how many years has that been?
We've been married for going on 92 years. But we do that in dog years.
Straight answer. You are not going to see. So don't expect a straight answer from me.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Don't expect straight answers from me either. But
I get it.
What our listeners can expect is to see CADY Huffman as Peggy Lee in her own words and music, July 24th. So wait, today is the 20th. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's Wednesday. This coming Wednesday night at the Green Room 42, and also on July 31st. Is 2 consecutive Wednesdays?
2 consecutive Wednesdays, absolutely.
Now, for more information on that, go to the greenroom42.com. But so much more to talk to CADY Huffman about, including, of course, the elephant, as it were, in the room, of course, the producers. So, what, I don't even know where to begin with that. Do you remember getting the phone call from your agent that said, you're Uma?
Well, and that's another good story, because I did not have to audition to be Ula. What happened was I got a call from Vinny Lift, who was the casting director, and he said, CADY, they're doing a reading of a new musical based on Mel Brooks' film, The Producers, and wondering if you would consider, for this reading the role of Ula. Now, by this point, I was in my 30s, and in the movie, the original movie, Lee Meredith is 19 years old and dancing around in a bikini. So I was like, that's what went through my head, and I said, yes, of course.
Of course.
So we rehearsed for about a week, and then we did 2 readings of this new musical, which really, once you cracked it open, we saw perfection. It was just so well written. And after, Anne Bancroft was sitting 3 feet off my left knee for these readings, and it was packed with all these suits, and the suits were purple in the face, laughing, which does not happen at every reading. They can be rather standoffish. And after the very first reading, Rocco Landisman came up to Mel and offered him the St. James Theater right there on the spot.
Right.
And then after the second reading, it was April 9th, 2000, Mel Brooks walks up to me and says, "Kid, when it goes, you're in." I was like, "Oh, okay." This is April 2000, and I do a lot of these readings, and they usually take years and years and years to happen. But by November, we were in rehearsal, and by May, we had won all. May 2001, we had won all those Tony Awards.
And I like to think that the producers was one of the things that saved Broadway just at 9/11, because people did not want to go into Manhattan. People wanted to, to stay away from doing anything in public. Were terrified. And yet, what was it, 2 days after the bombings, the producers was back up. And it's like, look, I had to spend $200 back then on tickets for the producers. I'm going,
Yeah, it was a trying time for Broadway, absolutely. And most of the shows were really, really struggling. And kind of what happened, because we were this crazy big hit, is a lot of people couldn't come into Manhattan. Like it was, there was no flying. It happened on a Monday. We were back to work on Thursday. So people coming from out of town were no longer able to use their tickets. So what happened was the New Yorkers got back in line and bought tickets to the show. And we kept selling out. And theoretically, what happened was if they couldn't get into our show, they would go to other shows, because it was really devastating.
Yeah.
It was just so devastating. But we did manage to reopen. We managed to pack our houses, and we would sing God Bless America at the end, and just the whole roof would blow off. And there were so many people just grateful to be able to laugh for a few hours and remember that there is goodness in the world and laughter. And I think I wouldn't credit us with utterly saving Broadway, but we were a key factor at that time. There was a lot going on. The mayor was really encouraging people to come in. I did have friends, bravely flying in from California just to support New York. New York needed a lot of support at that point. So there were a lot of factors, and we all came together in Times Square, and Jerry Mitchell choreographed the entire Broadway community to say, "Hey, we're here, come back. Let's not let the terrorists win." So there were a lot of different factors, and I think we were able to play a key role in that. Absolutely.
Wow. And I can't believe we've gotten so grim and depressing about of all things. This is like the...
Well, you got to remember, Mel Brooks fought in World War II. He was an engineer in World War II. This is, Springtime for Hitler is a powerful message. And it's told through comedy. But Mel Brooks is a very serious, intelligent person. So the reason we relate to his comedy so well is because of how smart he is, not because it's silly and doesn't mean anything. It all means a lot to him. And Springtime for Hitler is, a crazy parody of a devastating moment in history that he personally lived through.
That's a good point.
I do not discount comedy in any way. I think comedy often tells more of the truth than, whatever you want to call drama. What they say is like, anybody can pretend to be serious. You can't pretend to be funny.
Well, I try, but no, you're right. You're right. You haven't seen my show, Shalom, damn it. That's something pretending to be a comedy. But you got to tell me, you got to give me some story. I mean, you were there with Mel Brooks, working with him, and Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. Tell us some stories, some anecdotes, please.
Well, it was extraordinary. I mean, truly, it was the first time and since as well, the only time I've ever done an original piece of theater that never changed. Like Mel Brooks managed to, he'd always had this dream to improve his original film, which he won an Oscar for, by the way.
Right, the screenplay,
so it wasn't, as far as everybody else is concerned, it was fine. He wanted to improve it. So for 30 years, he worked on improving this Academy Award-winning script. And he switched the decade, we went a decade earlier than the original movie. But it never had to change. It was all right out there from the first day. There were maybe like a few little shavings of lines here and there, and the one section of Springtime for Hitler where Hitler has his, Gary Beach, may he rest in peace, the genius comedy of Gary Beach. But he comes out and goes, I was just a paper hanger, no one muscular. And then, like, the presidents come out and do all this crazy stuff. Like, that was the only part of the show that they worked on over and over and over again. Everything else was done and made sense and was beautifully cast. Nathan and Matthew were both willing to fall on their asses, make mistakes, and make everybody else feel like, let's just go for this, let's learn some stuff, make a comedy. It was the type of room that everybody dreams of being in as a performer.
And you also had
anything went.
The incredible luck of coming out of, in Chicago, everybody knew that it was going to be, by the time you hit opening night on Broadway, it was a fait accompli that the thing was going to be huge. You got rave reviews too.
It was crazy. It was crazy because, we were all just making a show. So you get into this, whirlwind. It's the tempest is happening all around you. But we were the quiet eye of the storm, kind of looking at each other like, how do we live up to all of this? This is nuts. In Chicago, if I was having dinner with Nathan and Matthew, they would put two people at our table just to stand there to keep people away.
Wow.
Because so many people were coming up to them to say hi. We felt so loved by Chicago. Chicago took ownership of our pre-Broadway tryout, which was beautiful. We had such a great time in Chicago. And they were the first ones. So, that's where the scalping started. Ticket prices, tickets were going for exorbitant amounts. By the time we got back to New York, and we're all kind of freaked out, like, how does this translate to the Broadway stage? And then it got even bigger.
Yeah, that was.
So it was a time of coming together as a family, because it's not all just hunky dory. It's a lot of hard work. Everybody wants to interview everybody, particularly Matthew and Nathan. So they're exhausted. We're all exhausted. So we're invited to do interviews. We're invited to do all the parties, which of course you want to go to because it's a once in a lifetime kind of experience. Like, I'm finally one of the Beatles, or as close as I'm ever going to get to being a Beatle. And so you want to do everything. So you're exhausted. You're adrenalized. It was an absolute thrill for that first year, particularly. I think I could sleep about 3 to 5 hours a night, but I would lay down for 8 hours.
Well, let me ask, so many things flying through my head talking to CADY HUFFMAN about all this. Now, you played Ulla in that original Producers for about how long of the show's run?
2.5 years.
2.5. And the show ended up running about, 5 or 6 years? Something like that.
It ran for like 6.5 years, yeah.
This is what I don't understand. And you won the Tony, right, for Ulla?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, Mazel Tov. So here, you've got this role. You've got a hit that people actually thought at the time would run 20, 25 years. It ran 6. You stayed for 2.5. Why do actors do that? Why leave if you have this guaranteed paycheck for a role that you won a Tony for? So obviously your rate went up week to week to week doing this show than when it was when you were first cast. Why leave?
Well, that's a lot of assumptions, Rabbi.
Oh, okay.
Your fee does not go up and up and up. It just, you have to fight for anything you get. I don't know, if you had to do your services, the service you do on Friday nights, if you had to do it 8 times a week, wouldn't you be tired?
I would be tired, but then I'd look at, what I have. As you said, you grew up with no money. So having the safety and security on Broadway, as when 96% of other performers don't have that, to say, oh, I'm going to audition for other things, and I'm going to try and work here for 6 weeks, and I'm going to go on the road with it. I mean, that is a consideration, no?
Yeah, but by the time I left, I was exhausted. And, I mean, a lot of things were going on, and I could work. You know, it also affords you a new type of career, afforded me, you know, more of an acting career than simply musical theater. And you don't get into the arts to do the same thing for years and years and years. There are certainly people who do stay with shows.
Right, but look at Phantom. I mean,
we want diversity. We want to see what else is going on out there. We want to create our own things. We want to, you know, that's what art is. It's not a stagnant thing.
Fair enough. Because I do wonder about that. If people finally, they, as you said, you were in the Beatles. You hit the dream. You hit Lotto on Broadway. And then it's like, after 2.5 years, and true, exhaustion, you're like, nah, let me try this, and it has worked out.
It's hardly that simple. And it does not say the Beatles for all those 2.5 years.
Well, yeah, they brought in Henry Goodman, and for some reason, I don't know, that somebody blew something there. Because the producers could have run as long as Wicked, it should have run as long as Mormon, and yet just something spark went out. I don't know why.
I don't know either. I really don't know. I'm not one of the creators. I don't know any of the choices that were being made. I was a hired hand.
Well, that brings us to the next question.
You know, I'm not there making the decision.
Of course. But
you know, I prefer to be in a position where I am directing, producing, creating.
That's right. Aren't you going to be directing a play pretty soon somewhere?
I am directing Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Oh.
Because obviously I love those plays with those good long names up in New Hampshire starting August 1st.
That's quite. Are you going to do it the Broadway way with all sort of the light and it was a pretty technologically involved show, or at least it seemed to be, with the lighting grid. Or you're doing it?
It was gorgeous. No, I'm doing it in the barn in New Hampshire at Weather Vane Theater.
Mm-hmm.
So we are very simply telling the story. So it's written for that type of spectacle. You know, there's 57 scenes in Curious Incident.
It's like the Heinz version of theater.
How to do that without lumbering through and changing scenery and everything. So we are going to use the technical abilities of space, but we don't have any hydraulics, we don't have any lasers, we don't have any neon. But the story itself is very powerful.
Oh yeah, so, it's about this autistic.
We're going to do our best.
Oh, no, Muslim, because you mentioned that you're directing, and I wanted to get that in there. It's in New Hampshire at the Weather Vane Theater coming up in a few weeks, right?
Yeah, and it's also in repertory. So by the time I get there, my cast will be already performing several plays.
Oh, okay.
And musicals.
Cool.
So my star will be starring in 3 musicals and rehearsing my play.
Gewalt. I mean, good for them. Do you want to talk about exhaustion? There you go. But when you're young, you just do it.
That's summer stock. That's why you do that in your 20s, and it only lasts a summer.
And that's why you dream of being in the producers, yeah. Well, let me ask, though, in terms of casting and some, we're talking, by the way, with CADY HUFFMAN here in the neighborhood. And I'm sure you've had to answer this a zillion times, but you know, at a certain point, years after the show was over, they did make the producers into a movie with Matthew and Nathan, and up as Uma, not you. Why?
Yep.
They could have had everybody. You were all alive then. Gary Beach was still, they could have had everybody.
Yeah, again, I'm not the one making the decisions. I'm not the person to ask. Of course, I get asked about it a lot. I was not consulted. I don't know the answer to that. And I have not seen the movie simply because I can't afford to have an opinion about it because I get asked so much about it. I would rather just leave it to its own thing and appreciate what I have rather than what I don't have.
But do you have any, this is a Jewish thing to ask, but do you have a resentment against, say, Mel Brooks? Because he could have said, I want her.
no, I don't have resentment. But, you know, several years later, Mel did come up and see me in another play and say, hey, really sorry about the movie. You know, they wanted a movie star.
There we go.
So, you know, you forgive, you know, I can't get too excited about a business that I barely understand. You know, the business of Hollywood, and nobody really knows what they're doing.
Because I remember, even in theater, because I remember a couple of years later, Cloris Leachman was begging to be in Young Frankenstein on Broadway. And Mel said, that's 8 times a week, you're 70-something. No, and she said, I got more spunk than a 20-year-old. What's the matter with you? And he went with Andrea Martin, which is no small potatoes, as it were. But still, you know, those decisions, you know?
Yeah, you know, the decisions are made. And actors, that's one reason I like creating things, directing, producing, rather than just performing, because, you know, you're basically at the whim of somebody else. You know, you're waiting to be given a job. I'd rather create my own.
Well, speaking to that point, you were a producer on at least one movie. You filmed a Teresa Rebeck play about 15 years ago. Well, what was it like? And how come you haven't produced more movies?
Well, I produced that film in 2000, right before I mean, literally, I was going to leave the acting profession and become a producer.
Whoa.
So my friend and I, Amy Turner, we were Dame Edna's Edna S.
Right.
Time.
Yes.
And Amy, who I know from being a showgirl in the Will Rogers Follies, she at this point wants to be a director, which she is now a director. But at that time, she said, do you know any playwrights who write strong roles for women? I said, you should read Teresa Rebeck. So she did, and she came to me with Sunday on the Rock, one of Teresa's older pieces.
Right.
And so the two of us, I read it too, and because we had a lot of time to chit-chat backstage at Dame Edna, and one of us, I'm going to blame her, she's going to blame me, said, hey, I think we could make this into a movie. And then we just sort of started pretending to make it into a movie. And then we made it into a movie. But I was wholeheartedly ready to give up acting because it just wasn't that fulfilling anymore. And it was, you know, again, waiting for somebody else to hire me could be very difficult. And literally we stopped filming, I think, November 1st on Sunday on the Rock. And then I went right into rehearsal for what would end up being my biggest job yet, which is the producers. So, you know, my plan, as they say, if you want to make God laugh, make plans.
Oh, so whoa! That's a Jewish phrase right there. Man tracht, Gott lacht.
You see how Jewish I am. You know, these things are just in me. So, you know, I had made the plan to become a producer and then gotten into the producers. So maybe I wasn't specific enough, but I think it worked out okay for me. So we had, at that time in history, if you wanted to make a film that looked like a film, you had to shoot on film. So we actually have a 35 millimeter print of that film. Now, if we were to make a film, we would shoot it digitally, and it would be much cheaper and much easier. So instead of film, I have produced my own web series, which should be coming out this year.
Is that CADY did TV?
That's CADY did, yeah.
How do people get that? How do people get it? Yeah.
Well, we haven't put it out there yet, so I will have to get back to you on that. But we do have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and you know we are figuring out how we would like to release that. But it's like a spoof, you know, like Curb Your Enthusiasm or some other things now that are so popular to do, you know, a star and make them into a fictitious version of themselves. So I thought it'd be hilarious to sort of take like a D-list Broadway star and do an alternate reality of myself. So it's me having to go home because I've, you know, blown it in the big city, and now I have to go home to my small town and run a small cable network there, cable channel, and just deal with being a very, you know, what I think of as myself as a very large fish in a very small pond. But, you know, so. Yeah,
it sounds like people, by the way, can go to CADY Huffman's own website to find out information about when CADY will be on television, and also all the other stuff you're doing, and when to see the show in Rhode Island, it's CADYHuffman.com, C-A-D-Y, Huffman with a U, CADY Huffman. Because you have to be all different.
Not the Jewish version. Yes.
That's right.
Believe me, I did my DNA because I was hoping for a sliver of Jewish or Chinese or Native American. No.
No, what are you then?
Italian, but apparently French, which none of my family knows, and then Upper West, Scott, Dutch, Upper West, Western Europe.
Got it. Speaking of names that sound like that, tell us a little bit, and please, just a little bit, about a show I do not know about called Revolution in the Elbow of Ragnar Agnarsson Furniture Painter.
Please, just a little bit hilarious. That is an Icelandic rock musical
Okay.
that I was hired to play. I don't remember I don't remember my character's name because they were all Icelandic names. But it was this wild piece of theater that literally took place inside of a man's elbow. So I went to Iceland to check it out because I was like, what culture has written this bit of craziness? Fell in love with the country. And weirdly enough, bringing it full circle, before I saw it on Broadway, I saw a version of Curious Incidents in Icelandic in Iceland. With none of the bells and whistles from Broadway. So I already, and in Icelandic, and I still understood the emotional journey of it. So I know that the play is possible without any of that other stuff.
And so what happens in this guy's elbow? I mean, I'm just...
Oh, it was after their fight, the big financial crisis that the world went through, but it all sort of started in Iceland, right? Where people were blowing up their Land Rovers, and it was all very, very public and very outlandish. So it was about corruption and greed and family values and all those things. But they just happened that we all lived in this.
Because nothing goes on in my elbow except bursitis. If it may be my tuchus, my scrotum, lots of stuff going on there. My knee.
Oh my goodness!
I'm just saying.
Scrotum, Rabbi.
Well, I have a scrotum. The moil didn't miss it. I'm just saying my elbow, my weenus. There's nothing going on there to write a musical about. But speaking,
well, I tell you, there is. If you've ever been to Iceland,
no, not.
There's a very they have finite land mass. There are not very many Icelanders on the planet. They literally have an app on their phone to see how each other are related to each other so that you don't hook up with your cousins.
It's like they do that in Borough Park. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they can, right? You all know how you're related.
Yeah.
They all, there's only about 300,000 Icelanders on the planet. So they all know how they are related. It's a very, very strong culture. So it's for them to have an entire world in an elbow does not seem strange because they live on an island.
Now, I mentioned also a tuchus. Why did I mention a tuchus? Well, or tush, as you learned it, because you use tush, but
tush, tuchus,
both. Well, you were also in a short film about 15 years ago. I'm just going to throw the title out there. Billy's dad is a fudge packer.
Oh.
I want to know, what is so special about packing fudge? I had a job stocking saltwater taffy in Atlantic City. And if you don't pack fudge just right, it melts. It's not good. What the hell is this movie about?
Well, my dear Rebbe, if you don't know, I'd rather not tell you. It is a spoof, obviously. A very funny short film done in the manner. Did you watch it?
No,
I know you can see it online.
Yeah,
It's all done in black and white with that Billy's dad is a fudge packer. All about those crazy films they made in the 50s about how to do things correctly.
I get it now.
Does it that way, whereas Gallant would do it this way. So it's a whole thing about how Sister is going to be a great wife. You know, they show her eating a hot dog. And then Billy's status. You know, it's full of innuendo that I'm not sure is appropriate for your show.
Well, probably. Or it would be in his endo, actually, if you think about it. No, I can't.
Well, see, now you're getting it.
Vaguely, just vaguely getting it. What we are getting is just a minute or a couple minutes more, if you have time, with CADY HUFFMAN here in the neighborhood. Let's pull out. I've been asking some very specific questions about things that you've been in. But what is the funniest thing that ever happened to you in theater, either live on stage or something you saw in the audience? What was just like one of your precious, funny memories in theater?
Well, what always comes to mind is when my pants fell off during the Will Rogers Follies.
Oh, hilarious,
and,
yes.
Yeah, hilarious. And I did fling my branding iron into the audience. You know, but thankfully it was not a real branding iron, but you can't tell that till it flies into the audience and doesn't kill somebody. But, you know, I used to rise up out of the orchestra pit, turn around and sing, little old me, all by myself, 26 years old, and that's how the show opened. And there was one night where I'm up there with my branding iron, and I start walking across the stage, and the audience sees it before I do, but my pants are slowly slipping down my leg. And finally, I get to the other side of the stage. I notice, I step out of them, toss them off stage, and keep singing. You know, I had enough clothes on for modesty, but, you know, if I'd actually been naked, I would have exited. But, no, my pants just slowly slipped off. I threw them off stage, and I kept singing.
These are the things that happen in live theater. It's the reason people go to the one that, you know, it isn't. People go to live theater just to see things going amazingly right. There's that old cliche that, oh, something could go wrong, and we're there when it happens once in a... No, you don't want the lights to go out. You don't want to have to leave Hadestown and stand on a street corner in 90-degree heat and hear the cast singing songs a cappella. You'd rather be in a nice air-conditioned theater watching the actual show, you know? But just like
exactly. And we had a night at the producers where we had a blackout, and it was near the end of the show, so the courtroom scene sort of stopped in the middle, and all the lights went out.
Ooh.
And then the emergency light came on, and we, you know, like, well, now what? The crew pushed the scenery on as far as they could manually. And then we all just decided to do the show without microphones, without anything else. We did the rest of the show in emergency light with back then the orchestra was right in front of us so we could see the conductor. Nothing was amplified, and we finished the show like that. And it was fantastic. You know, the audience was thrilled that they could be there on that night where everything goes wrong, and yet everything goes sort of almost better because you're experiencing something new and exciting.
All right, so I will give you that. That does sound like a wonderful thing to be part of, and then a once in a lifetime kind of thing to witness and be part of. So okay, I'll meet you halfway definitely on that one. And one other question here.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I don't meet people halfway on anything. Yeah, I'm a stubborn old Jew. If I go 1 inch, you know, what?
I'm the lucky one.
You are. You absolutely are. Except we're so lucky to have you. And one other TV question, because we want people to get ready to see you in your web series, CADY Did, when that is ready. But they do know you from television. You were on Iron Chef for a bunch of years. What's a funny or your favorite memory from doing Iron Chef?
Yeah, Iron Chef America. Yeah, it was the kind of thing, you know, it's the very first American food competition show. So it was before Top Chef and all those other things came up. So I think I was still doing the producers at the time, and a friend of mine who was new at Food Network was producing this Iron Chef America, which was based on the Japanese show Iron Chef, which we all loved because it was dubbed and hilarious, and they used all these crazy ingredients. So I get a call from my friend. He's like, "Hey, Katie, you're kind of a celebrity. Would you like to come on our show?" And I was like, "Oh, is there free food?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I will be there." So I did my first episode, And I guess I did okay because I tend to, I was like the every person. Foodies can be a little bit abstract and, talk in terms of that.
But you were sort of sitting in for the audience member, as it were.
So I could say, oh, this is green, that's about the extent. Oh, it smells like spinach because it's what? Spinach. And
that's what I hear from my proctologist. Yeah.
Oh, dear. Oh, my goodness. You are Randy. You are Randy, Rabbi.
No, I'm Sol. But,
Are you not? So why is it called Days Gone By?
Oh, well, see, I would figure since you've been watching the show for all these years, you would know that Dave is the producer of this program, and he is the main host, but he gets me sometimes to do sermons or to interview wonderful people like you. So it's his...
Well, see, I thought I would be talking to Dave, so I was a little bit surprised when it was Saul.
Oh.
Like a great surprise, Rabbi, but I was expecting to talk to Dave.
Oh, no. Dave, he does certain parts of the show, and then he's kind enough to let me do other parts of the program because I have a certain je ne sais quoi, if you will.
You certainly do, yes.
Yeah, it's part of my work release program as well. Like I get to do this program every week. Yes,
right.
But see, now that you know the show, you'll understand. You watch a couple of episodes, you'll be like, aha, now I get it. Or most people never get it.
Are you being videotaped then? Like we can see you, but we can only hear me? Is that what's going on?
That is correct. Yes. So my beautiful face is transmitting across Facebook as we speak, and your beautiful face is unfortunately coming through a speaker.
Gotcha.
Right.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Where the hell were we with Iron Chef? I don't know, something about food.
You said you're talking about Iron Chef. So yeah, there were a lot. There's certainly many stories, but I did end up doing it for 10 seasons, and got to eat some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. Became much more educated about food.
That's right. I mean, did you? Having to be on a show like that, did you suddenly have to educate yourself and say, you know what, if I go on here every week and I really have to judge with these other judges, I need to up my game?
Well, I think it was more about, I never thought of myself as an expert, so I could listen to them. I could give my opinion without feeling like I needed to sound as smart as they do, because obviously I don't have the same training. But I did learn a lot, and I realized, I actually am qualified because I grew up in an Italian home where every meal was cooked and it was cooked very fresh. We had great cooks, and it was, we ate a lot of really good food. And then as I got older and went into show business, I traveled the world. So I've been to Vietnam, Singapore, Japan, China. I've been all over Europe. I have eaten a lot of different cuisines.
What's the strangest thing you've been to these countries? Have you eaten?
What's that?
Well, you've been to all these countries. What is the weirdest dish? Because we were talking about this. Dave was talking about this earlier in the show. Have you ever eaten insects? Did they ever give you like some animal that I would never eat this, but you couldn't be rude and you had to eat it?
I'm not. I don't have any food phobias, so I have eaten insects. I've eaten crickets. I've eaten ants.
Oh, okay.
Probably other things. Traveling through China was interesting because I was traveling with a couple of college basketball teams, and the children, the young people, were much more reticent to eat what the Chinese had to offer because it didn't look like American food, and the Chinese are much more, if you order a quail, they're going to receive something that looks like a quail with a head and beak and feet. And
the beak is the best part. I love beak.
Well, to watch a Chinese person eat, there's no waste. Whereas Americans, you don't want to know that it was an animal. You just want to get a little piece of something that looks appetizing and eat it. So you learn a lot going to other countries where there is no waste. I have eaten, I guess maybe it was the giant clam in Singapore is one of their delicacies. It's that gooey duck clam.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I ate gooey duck in Singapore, which was delicious. And they do this mountainous kind of almost an Italian sauce all over it.
Ooh.
But I've eaten lots of stuff. I've eaten street food in Vietnam, so I really don't know what I was eating, but it was delicious.
Okay, good. No stray cats in that neighborhood. What?
What's that?
No, I just said that no stray cats in that neighborhood. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. It's an old joke.
I did not see anybody eating cats, but, who knows? But on Iron Chef, the only time they ever called me and said, will you do this episode, was when we did the awful episode, OFFAL, which is basically everything that falls off of a butchered animal. So we could be eating pig's ears, tripe, trotters, feet, and we could be eating, kidneys. We were eating everything, and I said, yeah, sure, I got no problem with that stuff. So one of the most delicious things was Michael Simon made this beautiful chocolate truffle just on the side of whatever the dish was. And I tasted that truffle. I said, Michael, why is this the best, most creamy truffle I've ever had? And he said, it's because I made it only for the texture with duck liver.
Oh, Pet, yeah, well, sure, yum. I love that.
Of course, makes sense, right?
Yeah. No, some of the other things you were saying, actually, for the first time in my life, I felt happy that I was kosher. I didn't feel I was missing out. Pig knuckle things.
I can't imagine. How do you survive being kosher? I don't get it.
I don't get it either, but I do it. This is Jews. We don't question, we just do.
I'm glad, yes.
But there is no question that we have had an absolutely marvelous, delightful time talking with CADY HUFFMAN in the neighborhood. She's been so kind to stay with us. I just one more question for you, but first, we want to remind everybody that she is at the Green Room 42, which I imagine is on 42nd Street. It would be rather stupid if it weren't. The Green Room 42, that is this Wednesday evening and next Wednesday evening, doing her show, her developmental musical bio of Peggy Lee, Miss Peggy Lee, in her own words and music. For more information about that, and also about her directing project she's doing, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime in Rhode Island, and she'll also be having her TV show in a couple of months that you can watch. Find out all this information at CADYHuffman.com. And yes, I will spell it out again because my viewers have no memory. CADYHUFFMAN. CADYHuffman.com. CADY, last question, and you've been so kind to stay with us all this time, but I'm curious, and it doesn't have to be a Peggy Lee song. What is your favorite song of all time?
Oh my goodness, my favorite song. Well, that is an impossible question.
I know. It's not Hava Nagila, but
what's that?
It's not Hava Nagila. I assume it's not that one, but I'm kidding.
Sing it though,
Yeah, so
and there are certainly songs from Fiddler on the Roof that are some of my favorites. I can't even answer it. I tell you, I sing whatever song I'm currently working on. Last night I sang Life is Just a Bowl of Cherries, which is one of my favorites. That's one of the songs I've sung for the most years. I sang it for more than 30 years.
Wow.
But right now I really love the Peggy Lee song, I Love Being Here With You. It's just a real sweet introduction to, camaraderie and beauty.
And talk about giving us a segue to go out on. I love being here with you. We have loved being here with you, CADY HUFFMAN, in the neighborhood. It just remains for me to say thank you again. It's been wonderful. I invite you back anytime. Well, not next week. Give it some time, because
Saul, you're adorable. One of the best interviews I've ever had. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. We just got a thumbs up, and God bless you, and shalom to you.
Shalom.
Bye-bye now. Bye. CADY HUFFMAN in the neighborhood. Oh, mit Mazel, mit Glick.